Okay, welcome back. Sorry about that, guys. Lost connection there for a second, so this is going to be a part two video of that. Where we left off, we talked about um, we're just talking about the single farm and how we manage those farms, web applications, and contact databases within multiple server farms. So our differences between our single farm and a multiple. So it's recommended for again production, and we talk about the SharePoint farm is a multiple server farm in a production environment. So again, in that specific technology and topology, you'll install this SQL server on a separate server. That on that on a SharePoint 2019 is installed, where we can create the tier deployment. Um, it affords this deployment affords the as SharePoint server and the SQL server's ability to be more scalable, which then provides the advantages of again with high availability, redundancy, the LBFO, and better performance for both the SQL and the server. I'm going to install it in I'm going to install it in my SharePoint site server just because I want to. I don't care. I have two servers. Again, actually, I have three servers. I'll create two servers and to show you the multiple farm server in my diagram, and then um, you know you can also have different types of diagrams here, and I'll show you how you can design them in just a second. So eh, this type of farm contains multiple servers, and I'll show you the drawings and how I draw it and within the SharePoint farm. It's recommended that you create the multiple server farm by using a three-tiered deployment. And I'll also explain what that means, 3D deployment in just a second. So when you look at single server farms, they're also known as standalone farm diagrams. So you have your server, which is what I'm going to have, and then I'm going to have my second server. And my second server is going to have SharePoint server with the same OS, obviously. And it's going to have that. And I'm going to add, there you go, I'm just going to add, let's add some more here. For neck teaming and for high availability, I'm going to give it two. All right. And I'm going to actually, you know what? Let's copy this. Let's get this back on the drawing board here. I'm just going to open up my Paint. As you all know, Paint's a great application. All right. So here's my standalone again. When we talk about the net cards here, and give myself two net cards. So this machine is also going to have two net cards for high availability. I'm also going to create two disks here. I want to create two disks here, and I'll explain why in just a second. So I'm gonna have I'm gonna create two more disks here. I'll also add two more disks, and I'll tell you why. Um, so one's gonna be just the installation files for the SQL, right? I'm gonna have a separate drive for that, so that's specific to the SQL, right? Installation, and then we're also going to have one for our database, right? So that's going to be our database. That's going to be a drive for database and logs. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So this is going to be for SQL installation, right? And SharePoint installation, right? So that it's separate from the C drive because you don't really want it. And again, I'll give this a letter, for example. It's going to be C. Let's say, for example, this is going to be, you know, H, and this is going to be I, for example. Doesn't matter, just whatever I want, or J, right? And And again, this is going to be our database and transaction log files, transaction log files, logs, and other logs and other logs. So I'm going to have that kind of, and this is going to be our physical disk, right? Physical disk, right? Right? And and that'll also be our SharePoint server here, right? So as you could see, that's kind of the diagram that I kind of want to, especially in my standalone server farm. And this is a uh, physical disk, right? And right, and this is our physical NIC, okay, or Ethernet 0. So you guys kind of understand what that means. And I want in this environment, I I want to use this for high availability, right? Um, in case of, or just for local, and one for internet. So one will have NAT and one will have, again, it all depends on how you want it done. But that's what I want. And I'm going to add my cards here. Okay. Well, that's going to be my Ethernet, my physical NIC, or Ethernet 0, right? And then this is going to be physical NIC, network interface card, Ethernet 1, right? So one is going to have, again, um, our local, right, with a static IP, and then one's going to have NAT, right? So we can have NAT here too. Again, I don't. Again, I don't have to. I like, again, I can disable that for. I don't really need it on my DC. I can disable it for internet. So, kind of here. You know what? I'm just gonna take this section here because I want you guys to understand this part here. Copy. This will also be here. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Make this a little bit bigger. Yeah. Okay. Paste. And I'm going to crop. I'm going to crop these two for now. But use that. Okay. All right. So this is sort of, I'll use that for later. But so kind of understand where I'm going with this. Again, I'll have a physical disk. This doesn't really need internet. Again, this will have our NAT for internet, right? And one will act as our local. So this will be our local, right? And this will be NAT for internet, NAT equals internet. And I'll show you guys how to rename those cards, right? Your DC doesn't need internet, so yeah, you could disable that after if you'd like. It's totally up to you. As long as I can get for DNS translation, we can get the IPs to host names, right? When we're logging into our farms. Our host names to IPs, right? So it can recognize those in our DNS roles. Here's some IP addresses in case we're gonna set that up later on, but kind of understand where I'm going with all this, because it is important for you to know what's going on here. Going back to the slides, um, so that's our standalone. We also talked about we'll also talk about a multi-tiered server and with a server farm. And again, within this server farm, it's sort of the same idea. You're basically giving yourself another server, so I can add a third server to my drawing here, as you can see, right? And give myself SQL server separate with its own physical disks, right? And own separate physical disks, so I can have two physical disks here. So let me take this away from you here. Right. Let's make a new one here. Right click, paint. Okay. So, so, so yeah, you're gonna have that same approach, right? Where you're gonna have the secondary physical disk, like I told you, for the installation files. You'll want to have it that's separate from your C drive, and that's a best practice. So again, you're gonna have separate drives for that. So you're gonna have one for the installation files and one for the um, transaction or log files or database files, right? And those can grow, and you want those at least 500 to a terabyte. Here's sort of an example of what I've seen in the past. So let me see if I can a little bit bigger for you here, right? And I'm going to get my drawing here, and I'm gonna have two. Okay, I'm gonna have two mix here. Okay, so again, between our multi-tiered, our multiple server farm, and our, you'll see a difference. I have two machines and three machines here, and again, this can expand or extend to two times the SharePoint server or two times the SQL. So I can have two SharePoint servers installed. It's recommended that you create the multiple server farm by using a three-tier deployment, and I'll explain what a three-tier deployment is in this aspect. And again, you'll see how my multi-tiered, I have three or more, right? And you can expand it to two SharePoint servers and two, so you can have a total of five or six different and two DCs. You can have six machines there just as the on the extension aspect of it, right? But when you're using a three-tier development in our SharePoint environment, you'll see what I mean by that. In this aspect, we're using 219. Okay, guys, we're going to be using 219. And we're using 2022. 2. You use 2022 or 2019. It doesn't matter. I'm using 2022 in my aspect. Yeah, and it's all up to you. You can use 16, but I'll also show you that too because I have that information for you on the actual best practices. But in my instance, this is just a test environment where we're on a 2022 server already on my DC, so I'm going to keep that consistent. In other additions, we're going to go based on best practices. Okay. Um, the SQL server as well, and this is a 19, and I think this is going to be a 216 if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be a server 216, right, or 219. 219. Let me go back to take that out of here. And I'm going select that. Sorry, guys. And based on that. Okay. So just remember that. On old documentation. Sorry, guys. I'm just repeating. Just gonna make this as easy as possible. So going through all the different versions I've done already in the past. I've done this multiple times. So you kind of understand how some of this stuff works. It's important to understand the differences in the farms and the different systems that are used within that. Again, I'm using the two physical or the three physical disks, depending on what I need it for and the services that I'm going to be using it for. So in this instance, I'm just going to do two, right? For example, but there can be more physical disks that you can add to your farms here or to your bare metal machines that are going to host those standalone or multiple tiered farms or three tiered farms. And I'll explain here why. So in our development environment, we have our specific services for our SharePoint sites, right? So we're going to have two SharePoint sites, right? And those SharePoint sites are going to have, 8 core, 16 GB of RAM. And then it's going to have the three different hard disks, as you can see. So these will kind of help you understand what we need them for and why we need them. I'm not going to use the exact environment, but again, with this environment, I'll probably use 24 GB of RAM on one of the servers, right? On my database server, so it's going to run my database and my front end. So I'm gonna have to give it much as much data as possible for RAM. And our hard disks are going to be obviously we're not going to install anything on our C drive as it might affect it later. So I'll have to add those other drives to it. And I'll give it 160 for applications, whatever I want. It all depends on what I need it for, right? So I can have it for system drives and applications. Actually, our C drive is going to be our system drive. Our E or G or F or H or whatever I want to. It's going to be one for data transaction, and that's within our database logs or transaction logs. And then we're going to have one for application services as well, right? Like your web apps, your central admin site. We can have one for search indexing, and that search indexing can also be that server can also have its also going to have its own database server, right? So we can add that to the database server on our third machine if we'd like, right? Um, yeah. So let's look at the different sizes. Again, it's all up to you what you want to use and how you want to use it. Um, you know, this will have this is also going to have a SharePoint site, right? So this is going to act as a standalone, and this is going to also act as a database. Well, this will act as our database, right? So we can use this as our database site. So I can install three if you'd like to show you as well too, if we have enough time. But you kind of get the gist of things. Oh, this will be like our database, right? So this will have um, our transaction logs and our database logs, right? So remember, by default, as soon as a SharePoint site is created, it has its own site. So make note of that and understand that as well too. Um, Back to our sites here. Okay, so I want to get quick into this. So three-tier topology, it creates the most efficient and physical logical layout for scaling out and in. Um, So if you look at the flow of services that go between, you're in a three-tier deployment or topology, you're going to have double of each. So you're going to have two web servers or front ends. You're going to have your application servers, and you're going to have two. So that's six servers total. Just make sure you have enough space for that, obviously, in your environments. And again, in this environment, the users are going to receive all the traffic from the end user, right? So you're going to see all the users receiving all the traffic from the end users and application queries or services, right? And what happens is the requests from the web server is then routed to the application servers, while those services are available to answer the queries and display the result of the users, right? And then in that flow of service, you also have your application servers. And again, the application servers offers the administration of the farm and manages. Let me grab that here back here. Grab my pen. Uh, this is also a good diagram to talk about here. So I can draw that out with you guys. Okay. So I'm going to grab my red pen. So as you can see, the flow of services, the the users are receiving all the traffic, right? So they're receiving all the traffic, um, and the application queries, right, from the end users, and those services from the end users. So the requests from the web servers, these two web servers, are then routed um, to the application services, right? Servers where all the services are available to answer and the queries to answer the queries and to just to display the results to the end user. Again, our applications offer administration of a farm and manage all the services in the farm, right? So the app in the flow of that service, as you can see, it goes back down. The application services respond with what kind of services were required, right? And then they respond back. Those answers are they respond. Then they respond back. Then those answers are then forwarded to the end user. So then those answers are going back to the end user, saying, "Okay, we received all the traffic. Um, these are the kind of services that were required, and then these are basically forwarded back. Those answers that were given are forwarded back to the end user, right? So the end users now know what's going on and what's been forwarded, right? When we talk about database service, that just stores the data. Simple, right? Um, from the application server, the data is being saved, is recorded in the database server, or retrieved from here, to which the user saves, right? So understand what that does, because that's also important when we're talking about the data being stored from the application servers, right? So that data is being stored, is the data that is being saved is recorded within here, right? The database servers, or retrieved from here, to which the user saves, right? So remember that because that is important, especially in the three-tier topology. Physical architecture, when we decide to plan your deployment, um, right? We're looking at 19. It's necessary to understand the physical architecture of SharePoint. Yeah, it is true because you're talking about two ways. You're talking about the size, right? So it can be measured in numbers of users and numbers of documents. Like, you can use the categories of farm like a small, medium, or large. If you want to learn a little bit about that, you just click on the link. I can send that over to you. Um, and topology, right? So the topology uses the idea of tiers or server groups to define the logic arrangement of server farm. I think further down we're going to be talking about farm sizes because that also is important for physical architecture. So it's used as a fundamental measurement where the server is farm is considered small, medium, or large. A small farm can be scaled out by three tiers by using dedicated application servers in a response to the number of users, the number of content items, and the number of services that are required. Okay, that's important. Physical medium sized server farm typically consists of two or more web servers, two application servers, right, and more than one database server. So sort of like a three-tiered deployment topology, right? It's recommended that you start with a small farm that has a dedicated application server and monitor the farm to determine if you need to put put to accommodate the workload placed on the servers. Okay, so for scenarios in which services are known to use disproportionate number of resources, we can scale them out to the application tier. In a medium-sized farm, we can monitor performance data that will indicate which services we should consider moving to a dedicated server. And we talk about large server farms. Those are logically. logical results of scaling out to a medium farm to meet the capacity and performance requirements. Obviously, it can be designed before, can also be deployed by design before a 2019 solution is implemented, right? So our three-tiered topology environment typically uses dedicated servers on all tiers. So that'll include your large server farm. And as you've seen, we've discussed the flow of services that go between the web servers and application services in that three deployment tier and the database servers. Um, Services are grouped according to their roles in the farm. Okay, so when we talk about topologies, we talk about the tiers. We have our single tier deployment, our two-tier deployment, and our three-tier deployment. Um, that deployment topology uses the topology uses tiers as models for logically arranging SharePoint farms according to the roles they play. So a single tier deployment indicates SharePoint 2019 and database servers are installed on one computer, whereas a two-tiered, where your 2013 components and database are installed on separate servers, and that's part of our multi-tiered farm, as you can see here. They're on separate servers, as you can see. And then you have your three-tiered deployment, or front end or FWs or WFEs or front end web servers are the first tier. The applications are the second tier, and the database servers located on the third tier. And that deployment is used for medium and large. So understand the different three-tiered deployments as we spoke already about them, and the different size environments and topologies that are used for that physical architecture when we're going to go ahead and build those. Okay, so make note of that because it is important. Next thing that's important as well too is the server roles and components. um, you know Web servers include in the farm can be configured to perform specific SharePoint roles. There's three different types. We have our web servers, which is our front end. And again, those servers can handle requests, or they can be configured to host dedicated query components or other services components, right? So there's a minimum of one to a maximum of 5 or 6 servers in this web server, right? It's recommended in any site environment to have two, right? So there'd probably be 1,000 requests per minute for 2 web servers, and that's 50% load balance mathematically, right? So that's important to note. Let's see. And you can have an additional role for distributed caching. You can separate the caching service. That's another topic here. So that's important to note, mathematics of that. Let's do, oh, that's good note, good read, good understanding of that. So in any environment, you should have at least 2 web servers, right? So you're kind of using that three-tiered process. In my instance, I'm not. I'm just, explaining to you guys that it is. So, for example, if you have 1,000 requests per minute, again, I'm going to explain this to you. So, if you have 1,000 requests per minute with 2 web servers, that's 50% of the load balance on each service, right? So, you have 500 requests going to one and 500 requests, number of users requesting per minute, and then n number of users requesting on the second server. So that is n 50% of the load there on each server. So again, we can have additional roles for distributed cache, and that's something that you're going to talk about as well when we're designing that. And you can separate the caching services for the organization farms, where the front end services only deal with the client requests, and the other servers with the dedicated role of distributed cache deals with the request of caching only. Um, another another web server that we can talk about. Well, we've talked about web servers, but other servers that we're going to be talking about are again, we'll talk about that into depth because that is important when we're talking about that. And I think we should add it here because that's something that I want to talk about. Should have talked about it here, but it's okay. So no problem. Let's talk about application services. Again, those are dedicated servers that host the SharePoint Central administration website, right? That's going to host that and other services on the farm that require dedicated resources or just isolation from the web tier. Um, this also manages system functions and farm, right? So that's what the application service does. And I think I said that it offers administration of the farm and manages all the services in the farm. So that's what the application servers do. Okay, and that those responses, going back between the web server, obviously, those kind of services were required, right? They respond and answer back, right? Obviously, and then those answers are then forwarded to the end users. So understand that. Then we talk about database servers. Again, these database servers, when we create them, are created as standalone instances for high availability, right? You can create database mirroring or failover cluster for these database servers, right? Again, Microsoft's SQL Server based, these database servers, right? And where the other two are SharePoint servers with specific roles and services that you add. SharePoint application control database. So you can control the databases within our SharePoint app. You can have multiple databases like your primary and search DB servers. And then obviously you can have high availability, which is required for fault tolerance and TR sites, right? So your disaster recovery sites. And there is some disaster recovery stuff you can talk about in Azure. I think I spoke about it a little further up here with Azure Site Recovery. And I'm going to send you guys the link on that for disaster recovery. This is sort of going to be tips and good ideas, tips and ideas, right? And I'm going to duplicate that. All right, guys. Where are we? Where are we? Okay. So again, we talk about that disaster recovery site. I'm going to add that because that is important to know a little bit about that. I'll send you guys some of that information too. Okay. So hang tight. Um, when we talk about roles and components for web servers, so web servers, you have to understand what we talked about already in the diagram in our last drawing here. We discussed a little bit about that and in our here. So our web servers are receiving all the traffic from end users and application queries, right? So that'll be our front end, right? For those services, right? And then those requests from the web services are then routed to the application servers, right? where all the services are available to answer, and those queries and whatever displays our results and results are resulted to the user, right? So um, those servers are used to serve web pages. They're used to serve web services and web parts required to process and respond those user requests. Make sense? Straightforward. And again, these requests, right? When we talk about requests, and we did talk about this a lot in our diagram, are received by the web servers and are routed to the application servers. So the web server then receives the results from the application servers and then displays the results to the users. So remember, a minimum one to a maximum of 5 to 6 servers are recommended. Web servers are recommended in large environments. And again, it's recommended in any site environment. And again, I think I spoke about this already, to have two, uh, right, in a multi-tiered, right, or three in a multi-tiered environment, um, right, when you're building it. Because, say for example, there was 1,000 requests per minute coming in to those two web servers, right? So for example, you had, let's go back to the drawing here. So I had n number of requests. Quickly use my pen here. Use my pen here. Okay. So so n number of requests are coming in, right? So these are the two web servers. So n number of requests are coming in, right? So they divide it into one, divide it into two. So those n number of requests, obviously, you've got 1,000 users. They're not going to give you 1,000 users or requests within this one server. You're going to divide this into 50% of your requests. So you want 50% going to this one and 50% going to that one, right? So for load balancing, and that is important, and then that is best practice. So kind of understand how um, that works, because it is important. When those when you're routing to the applications, or just routing to from those, the traffic that's coming in within that, and anything that's routed within that, it is important to understand that um, when you're receiving results from the application servers, or just display results to the users, right? In any aspect, you can have a role, for example, too, within uh, your web server for distributed cache. So you can separate the caching service, right? This will also help with performance as well, um, of the organization's farm. I've seen in the past where the WFS only deals with the client requests, and other servers with a dedicated role, right? For distributing cache deals with the request of just caching only, right? So that's something I've seen when manufacturing or deploying these specific infrastructure, architecting your designs, right? You know, we also talk about the different roles on for the search servers. You have your SharePoint search server, and you have your distributed cache server, right? So your search server dedicates is dedicated just for search server, right? And it can have dedicated search database servers, right? So it'll have a database attached, a default database. So you can use the search crawlers to be configured carefully for optimizing those results. And then within our distributed cache server or caching servers, you can provide caching services, right? And that'll help maximize your performance and produce IOPS on your DB server. So IOPS is your input output per second, right? So that's data your inputs and outputs, right, of that data. And again, you can configure those within your web front end servers or web servers, or recommended dedicated servers, right? So again, it's up to you. So here's a sort of a drawing of a architecture for a large organization that I've kind of seen and being used, and like to discuss about with you guys, where you have your network. load balancer, right? So you have your users and number of users with those requests. So again, the users load balanced on this network configured load balancer. It could be an F5. I've seen tons. See if I can get you one second. Yeah. So what is it? Um, Here's a small farm. Here's kind of a scale up, scale out type of instance here. I'm trying to get you guys. What was it that I wanted? No, no. Here's a good virtualization scalability in terms of um, how servers are implemented, which is kind of cool. Um, your different hosts and how your production internal user farm, which has your web server and your query servers, right? And then you have them a second one on a virtualization that's got the same servers, web server, and then you have your web queries. And again, this is just a virtualized farm architecture. But when we talk about, there we go, load balancing. So the hardware-based load balancing is best on F5, Cisco Content Switch, or as Citrix NetScaler. So Windows networking load balancing supports unicast, so used for Tunix, and multicast, which requires router support. So these are some good hardware-based, and I need to, you guys need to understand that because that's kind of important um, when you're looking at the different network and software configured load balancers, right, and the different hardware requirements for that. That's also important to note. So imagine and here's some information on that as well too. Like I'll give you guys the links after to take upon and read for yourselves to kind of see. So imagine you guys having a primary site, right? And within that primary site, you've got a primary database server and you've got a search database server, right? By default. So you have your defaulted servers, right? So your user balance, right? Low balance, again, coming, so the n number of users, right, are that are going through this load balancer. The load balancer, the user load balance will be determined by the two front end server machines. So in this instance, we have web um, web front end one and web front end two servers. So these are two separate servers that are both servers are querying the data from the primary database server in milliseconds. So again, they're going back and forth. And those requests are coming and those IOPS are hitting by the WFE to the primary database server. So from the N number of users through the load balancer, right, into these two WFE that have been load balanced to 50% are querying data from the primary database server back and forth in milliseconds. So understand that and how that works, right? So you also have your distribution cache server and you have your server, right? So your search server, then you have your SharePoint application server, right? So the distributed cache server, I don't know if I explained this to you guys already, but will cache all the frequently called and requested data. If it's already cached, it will entertain the user's request. Makes sense? So this will greatly reduce the load or IOPS calls on the primary database rather than it going directly to the primary database server. Make sense? So this will the distribution cache server will cache all the frequently called and requested data. So it'll cache it, right? If it's already cached, it will entertain the user's request, right? Between the FE and the so we're talking about here between the FE. talking about here, right? So this will greatly reduce the load or IUP calls. So it'll be IUP calls, right? It's you know, your data is coming through, right, on the primary database, right? So instead of going here, it'll go here, right? Rather than going directly to, so instead of going here, it goes directly, it goes, so rather than going directly to the database, it reduces the load. So this will kind of reduce the load. This server will cache all the fruit and then it'll reduce the load that goes here. So that's important. It just fetches the data from the already cached memory. So the memory within here, right? So the memories in here of your distributed cache server. It normally, I think it's 22233 or something like that, or 2233. I can't remember, but it's, yeah, there you go. It's 22233, right? So if I were to go back to this, I think it tells me here. This is what the site is for. So I'm going to copy this site and I'm going to open this up in a new web page. I'm going to paste it, click enter. And if we look at the different cache services by central administration, it should give me the port numbers here too. So reservations, memory reservations. So reserve 2 GB of memory. This is in the services that are running on the, so for example, 16 GB, you know, 2 GBs are reserved, so we can do the reservations, and that'll give you 14 GB left. This remaining memory is allocated for the cache service, so take half of the remaining memory and convert it into MB. So it would be 7,160 MB or 7 GB, close, right? We're dividing that by 2. So that this is the cache size. So that's how the cache size is going to work. So when your server farm is dedicated distribution cache server, it'll use the following method to calculate how much memory can be assigned. So if our machine server is 16 GB, right? And we would have to reserve at least 2 GB, right? So the physical total memory on the server is 16 GB, right? So that's going to be our physical memory available on the server. So to reserve 2 GB of memory for other processes and services that are running on the cache host. So that'll be leave us with 14. So this is now going to be the remaining memory that's allocated for the distributed cache service. Now taking half of the remaining memory is going to be the cache size for the distributed cache service. Okay. So we'll have 7,160 MB or 7 GB allocated for cache size, right? So that's going to be our example for that. Remember what it uses, what port it uses, what port. I think it's 20 triple two double three or double two triple three, something like that. What port does distributed cache use? Yeah, there we go. 22233. There we go. So that's what it uses for that. So those are the firewall considerations for that. So that we need to allow for communication ports within our firewall. So you can create firewall rules for that as well. Yeah, so that's important. Yeah, so 22233. That's what I said. Did I say that? Yeah. Okay. So since so we also now talk about a search server. So we also have a search server that's separate. Again, you need a set. This is a multi-tier. You're gonna need a search server as well too, especially in large organizations. I've seen. Right, and these can also be based on load balancing, right? From F5 um, Cisco content switches or Cisco. Citrix NetScalers, you'll see, and you'll see this a lot. Those machines are acting as load balancers for that. So in a search server, since the users are requesting search queries or searching for any data, any calls, right? Any calls will be forwarded from the WFE server to the search server. So it's going to go from here to here. So it's going to call it out, right? From the users. So any users, so it's going to come from the users through to the load balancer into the WFE server and then calls out to the search server. So that's the flow of that. The search server will query the search, so it'll query it. Oh, yeah, I found the search related data from the search database, right? Despite hitting the primary database server. So it'll probably work with the search server database. So this is where we're going to have to create another database for that instead of having to knock on this one, right? And that'll create that'll create a lot of performance issues. Like if you're not going to deploy, and again, when we talk about SharePoint, again, when we talk about the search database, right? We talk about, okay, if you're not going to deploy a separate search database server, then your virtual drive, think about it, your virtual drive of the search DB server. So if there's a drive in here, right? From your so right, so then so basically you're not going to deploy a separate search. Then if you're not going to deploy, sorry, a separate search database server, then the virtual drive with it of the search DB server from your primary database server, right? So that the read and write calls of your drives are segregated among two separate drives, if that makes sense, right? So you have to understand the read and write calls, they need to be separated. So you don't want to put everything and knock everything on here. You want to be able to segregate the read and write calls, the read and write calls, right? Between these two drives. So that's why you want to have your own search database server that's separate from your primary data. And that's what I was trying to say there. Um, and that's how that works. And again, it's simple when you look at it, the diagram, and you kind of read of how I explain this to you, you'll kind of understand a little bit more and how this works, right? Especially in a large organization. And this works 130% of the time, right? So you also have your SharePoint application servers, right? So your SharePoint application servers has the inventory of all the servers that are part of the server farm. It mentions that the distributed cache server and the search server is available despite hitting this. So these are still available to that despite hitting this primary database server, right? So kind of understand that and how that's works in a large organization. Um, all this stuff out. Yeah, okay, so that's that. That's very important takeaway. So again, as you can see, we talked about this already, but the request from the web servers is routed in this flow of services that go between the web servers and application servers. And then, we also talk about the data that's being saved and recorded in the database or retrieved from to which the user saves. So this is the stored data that's stored from the application servers to our database servers. So we have to understand that as well too. And the application servers respond with the kind of services were required. They respond, right? And then they respond, and then they answer back, right? So they respond and then answer back with that response that they get. So those answers are then forwarded to the end user. So very straightforward. Okay, very easy to understand. When we start talking about application side of services, and I know we've already talked about it, offers the administration of the farm and manages all the services of the farm, right? So we also understand that they host service applications, many service applications, and there are more now than ever, right? So it's important to have an understanding of what each are and ensure they're properly configured to efficiently provide the services for which they're intended. So there are two new optimized server tiers, and the types of services applications that might be found are included. So you have your front end, right, that are optimized for low latency, right, which access your BDC, your MMS, and your user profile. Your batch processing, it's optimized for load balancing, like your user profile sync, your workflow, your machine translation service, and your work manager. And we also talk about specialized workloads. Again, this is if needed. It's not really part of the two tiers, but again, it's if needed. Again, you can also special use this. It's optimized for medium throughput. So like search, Excel calculations, performance and project, right? So for example, um, you know, the number of create depends on the number of applications created. So if you're planning for deployment of, it's important to understand. So some services like Excel or Visio, not necessarily these. Again, do not create their own content database. They're not. They don't have to be those. But in the initial stages of the installation, you would log into the database after the SharePoint install, and then at that point, you'll see so many databases which are created by SharePoint already, and at that point, after that, every service or some of the services which handle and offer a lot of data processing will be creating their databases inside your database server. So initially 10 to 20 databases will be created, then will increase. So we have to have enough hardware resources on a high-end server, right? So again, uh, we get created when we're doing the deployment of SharePoint and it's successfully connected to. So we have the SharePoint configuration database. We have our central administration database and some other content databases, right? So um, this is what gets created when we're doing that deployment of it. Um, so we can create these tiers again when going back to where we are. So again, I think I went a little ahead of myself, but this is what gets created within our database servers, right? Um, when we're doing deployments of SharePoint, right? And then successfully connecting to the SQL server. Um, database servers are used to host SharePoint configuration databases, CA databases, your central admin databases, and several databases required to store the content associated with your web and service apps, right? So within your Microsoft SharePoint servers, right? So it depends on this server that you have. So the database server is the most critical one in the firm. So again, this is really, really important um, server because it requires special attention. So these servers should be optimized for throughput and should always use and the use of database mirroring, clustering, or always on between your primary and your secondary sites, right? Your source and your destination should always be implemented to ensure high availability, right? So you'll kind of understand that as well too when you talk about the two specific servers. Um, did I talk about that? Yeah. So in my two servers, again, when I talk about high availability and always on high availability in synchronous or asynchronous mode, right? Um, you know, for example, your primary site goes down or your secondary site, your primary site farm goes down. Um, it, 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 it crashes, right? In this example, we can configure the load balancer so that our end users requests from our front end servers, so these servers here, let me get my pen, right? These servers here, right, goes to the secondary site. So this is what we want, right? So we want this to go there, and we'll want this to go here, right? So that's our main goal. Again, you can also have auto switching, right? Load balancers as well, but that's a setting that you need to configure within your hardware servers, your F5s or your Cisco content sites or switches. And again, if right, so you can also have those load balancers as well, right? Um, and and if the primary sub fails, it'll relocate all the users' requests automatically. So all the users' requests that are coming in will say, okay, I'm gonna go here now. So now their goal is to hit through the load balancer that's configured to the available, always on, high available, synchronous, asynchronous mode users that have been switched over here in instant seconds. It's just a switch of a second, and as soon as that configuration is done, it should automatically go there, right? So understand how that works because that is important, right? Especially when we design, right, these specific instances. Um, hmm, these, I don't need these drawings here. Okay. All right, so that's done. Um, so the number of data, and again, this is service should be optimized through throughput and the use of database mirroring. So we're mirroring, clustering, or always on should always be implemented to ensure high availability. So those are number of users are automatically switched over to FE front end 3 server and the web front end server 4. So you'll see those automatically, uh, even if that machine crashes, right? So the number of databases created depends on the number of web applications and service applications that are created. So as you're planning for deployment, guys, of the SharePoint, it's important to understand the impact of the database service. Okay, so important, right? When we're creating, right? So that's important. And we're also planning, right? That's also important too. So a little bit of wordplay. This will require you to have lengthy and detailed conversations with your SQL Server database administrator to ensure that the person understands the requirements and potential impact on the SQL Server as SharePoint 2019 is deployed and configured. Okay, so you have that lengthy and with your SQL administrator. Again, you as administrator should understand that person understands the requirements and that the impact on the server is going to have. So we need to make sure that we're prepared when we're doing that, right? So we're going to act as our database admins or SQL database admins. So we're going to deploy this ourselves in a 2 or 3 tiered environment. We also talk about, again, when we talk about databases, I explained this stuff already. We spoke about this, right? The three, um, what gets created when you're doing the deployment that's successfully connected to the SQL. So this is obviously gets created automatically. So you're going to get that SharePoint configuration database. You're going to get that central admin database, and you're going to get some other content database. And again, you got to create other databases. Remember that. That's going to be important for you to understand when you're creating those sites. Let's see what else. Oh, they had. Um, yeah, yeah, this is scenarios here. Did I want to talk about that content database? Yeah, yeah. So, you know, you can have again if there's so for example, you're um in a storage point of view for content database, your content database limit is 200 GB by default. Um, in a scenario for our on-premises website for a large organization, in this example, our SharePoint web app um, has has a site collection that has our sub lists or site lists, sorry, our subsites or lists in our document. As soon as that DB, um, so for example, if I have my if I have my n number of site collections going through that, I only have a limit of 200 GB. So even if my limit is 5,000 and my warning is 2,000, that's all I got. Now, if I want to create two content DBs and two site collections, I would have to create another uh, database. So as soon as that database reaches in the content DB, we have to create a new content DB or database and then create a new site collection on the newly created database from a site template without data. So as you can see, um, there's a limit for three site collections, and those limits are 5,000 users. Um, and our warning is 2,000. So understand that as soon as it reaches the limit and there's a warning, there's a limit, you create a new content DB, right? So you create a second content DB and a second site collection. So as soon as that limit gets reached, you're going to create a third, and that's for collection N, a 3 or 4 or 5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Um, say for example, you create two content DBs and two site collections now, in this instance, right? As soon as the data limit reaches in the content DB, the defined content limit at the SQL database level, right? We got to define that level and then reaching the limit, split MDF file to the primary, to the multiple files, which is your secondary for keeping read and write optimization, right? So you have to kind of understand that too, because it's the design aspect of it. So you have to kind of understand as soon as the data limit reaches in this content DB, right? We have to define the content DB at the SQL database level. So now we have to go to the database and define that. And then reaching the limit, right? Split the MDF file, which is our primary, to our multiple files, which is our secondary, for keeping the read and write queries. So that is also optimal when we're going ahead and we're doing that, right? So you have to kind of understand that. Because site collections are created automatically through self-service site creation, they're automatically created in the web application content. So for scaling and sizing, we recommend the maximum of 10,000 site collections per content. So they can either be all my sites or 7,500 my sites, or up to 2,500 used for other purposes, which is sort of your warning and whatnot, just to have an extra database. So however you might start to notice marginal degradation, and that's important when you're designing this, your recommendation for that. You might exceed these limits. It will gradually, or some cases, suddenly increase as more site collections are added. So the more site collections you add, the more degradation in performance you might seem to see, right? Or in some cases might suddenly increase as you add those, right? So it's generally not a problem because it supports up to 500 content databases per fund, which could all be in one web app if you choose. Now, which would potentially allow over 1 million site collections per farms, if that makes sense, if your numbers are good, for all you mathematics out there. Even though 500 content databases won't affect the performance, guys, of the end users accessing those sites, farm administrators might notice that, hey, some operations, such as creating new site collections, might take more time. And you'll see that as well, too, right? So Um, what else? That's about it now. I just want to kind of give you guys the heads up before we go ahead, and I think we spoke about stretch farms. It's just a farm topology that includes data centers that are near one or another or are connected by handbell with fiber optic links. So in this environment, it's possible to configure the two data centers as a single farm. And if you want to try that, it's totally up to you. Now back to our SharePoint lab. Yes. Woohoo. Yay. Let's create. Let's talk about, so this is where we're going to create our disks. Okay. Our installation features. Nope, nope, no, no server roles. We don't need to talk about that yet. We talked about that already. Um, Technical diagrams is when I installed that. Took this already. Okay. So again, this was the exam sites for the administration in 2010. These are all deprecated now since 2016. Um, there's servers sites. This is it. There's a MS. I think it's called the MS. I can't remember the name of it. I have to get back to you on that. It's called the MS 301, and that was for SharePoint server, and that's been deprecated as well. I'll give you some information. I'll send you guys some information on that if you guys still want to go ahead and take those exams. I know a lot of them have been deprecated. Let's deploy Active Directory. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to deploy Active Directory on the first server, right? For Windows 2019 or 22. Um, we're going to install the standalone server for SharePoint on a member site. And that's what we're going to do today or in the next video. Um, so, and then we'll install two SharePoint servers in a SharePoint server farm on a second and third server, and then talk about the differences and best practices, right? So we've already talked about the differences and best practices, but we'll just go ahead and we'll scratch this out. But you'll see as we talk about it, as we create it, we'll also be talking about that too. Here's a infrastructure lab that I created many years ago. Client. Uh, this is standalone. This is what I'll kind of explain to you when we get to that point. Standalone server features. What else can we talk about here? Okay, so let's just go ahead and install. Welcome to this, and this is going to be our lab. Right. So we're going to prepare an environment. So ensure our server meets the. We need to ensure your server meets hardware and software requirements. So we're going to check our documentation for server 2019 hardware requirements, and we're going to ensure that our 2019 is installed for software. Again, if it's not installed, we're going to set up that one machine on our server. I think we've already have a server 2022 installed, right? So we're going to say 2022 is installed. Server 2022 is already installed. And skip the step. We can skip this step. Okay. So, right. I'm just going to highlight that because that's what we're doing here. Actually, it's here. So that's fine. You know what? Let me take this out here. So we've already done that here in the next step. Um, so we have our operating system, Windows install. So this goes here actually. So we've already set that up. So I'm gonna add that here. Okay, all right, there we go. So we also need to install a SQL server 2016, SP1 or later, Enterprise Standard Developer Edition, because it's best practices and that's what they say. So if we go back to um, our uh, so when we're looking at 2019 servers, we're looking at a 2016 or 17 RTM version that needs to be installed on on that uh, on that server or a separate server, like we said, and and again that'll be installed on one of our servers just to minimize space. I know you guys probably don't have space, but if you do have space, make sure you create that third SQL machine. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is, create your SQL machine on one, right? It's a little bit bigger, right? So that's going to be your SQL server, right? 2016, right? And that's the best practices, and it's also going to have our SharePoint server on there. Point server with arm, right? That can also be that. And then, because it's our database, right? So this is going to be our database server, right? And that's going to have our two, and this is going to be our SharePoint site, our standalone server, SharePoint server, and that's going to act as a standalone, right? That's important to understand, right? And these are all going to be on Windows Server 22. That's going to be our operating system. A cut, Control V. This is already completed, and it's got our AAA services, or ADDS, which is our DC, or DNS, or DHCP. That's what's going to have. You don't really need DHCP, but again, it's totally up to you and your environment. I am going to I want you guys to try this on your own, and again, um, and again, I think it's grayed out by default, but another role is we're gonna add to this one is GC. So this is also gonna be a GC. Okay. So that's gonna have our global catalog. I think it's grayed out, but it's added already because it's added already. But that's another rule that you wanna ensure that you have in your database your domain controller. And this is going to be one of our member sites. These are both going to be member sites, obviously, both members. So member servers, right? They're both member servers, obviously. They're going to be connected to the domain, right? That's going to be member servers one or member server one, right? And that's going to be member server two. These are both member servers, right? That are going to be domain joined, right? And one is going to be our SharePoint server, and then the other one's going to be as a standalone SharePoint for test purposes. And the other one's going to be our database server, right? So that's going to have our SQL. But I don't want to do it this way. I want you guys to do it this way. I want you guys to try it this way. I want you guys to try both ways. If you have the opportunity, please feel free to do so. I want you guys can also, again, I want you guys to you know, learn how to delete and remove and add. And I want you to save space because you guys might not have that space, but just in case, have those other drives created here for that purpose. And I think I've already discussed those drives and where what you should be creating for those drives, right? Um, and what they're used for, right? So you have your physical C, so you're not really uh, installing all that stuff on your physical C, and we're going to use computer management to on these two servers, um, right? And we're not going to be creating templates for these. We're just going to just create a specific blank machine. I can show you how to create a template, but this isn't the course for that. Uh, but if you're creating multiple farms in the future and you're extending your database servers, your web application servers, your um, web app and your application servers, then yeah, please feel free to do that. Okay. Right. So this is all separate. Your SharePoint server files should also be on a separate drive. So remember when we're creating that, and your database files will be on another, right? So this will kind of be like uh you know SharePoint SQL install files, right? We'll see that actually being done. Uh, and this will be your log files. But again, because it's good to separate it, and I'll tell you, you're not really playing around with the install files, the system files. I kind of showed you a picture, if I'm not mistaken. Just want to make sure that you guys see that again, just in case. So you have your system drive, so that's going to be your C drive. You have one for your application, and then one for your data log. So remember that. And then because we're our second server is our our first server, our primary SharePoint server farm um, is built for applications. It's also going to be built for a data log farm. So I'm going to create another server for that, another hard drive for that, separate drive for that. And that's going to have 500 GB, for example, or 250 GB as it grows. I can put it as much as I want from 150 to 200 GB, depending on the server and what I need it for, right? So um, just make sure that you have the right RAM and processor for that specification. So, for example, on our WFE server, I would give it, 12 core processor speed and 24 GB. And I'd give it 3 disks. I'd give one for the system drive, one for the application, and one for the data log, right? So that's a good example. Um, and we also have our test environment. So again, this is sort of what you want to see. So in this case, I'm going to use my physical disk, my C drive for system drive, right? Right, and then I have my 80 GB for application, and then 100, 250 for data log, right? So we can go ahead and use that um, for the drawing, for drawing that. Um, we have our test environments too, but just sort of an idea of numbers will kind of help you with what you can. And again, this will grow, right? This will grow. You can change this. You know, you'll have rows and rows and rows upon disks. You can always add on to that, or just migrate to different servers if you want. It's not a big deal. Like like even your updates too. So you just have enough for updates in case. So I'll give it 150 for sure. I don't want to give it 60. I think it's too little. I know by default they're asking for that, but I don't know. I just think it's too little there. So, like I said, I just want to keep this 60 apps and then 250 data. 150, 100, let's say 150, 150, 250. Okay, we'll do, right? And we'll give it 24 GB of RAM, right? For our database server. Right? And then our database server obviously is going to have more for data and then transaction logs, right? So you'll see a lot of data going through those database servers. And it looks like the data um, is a tier 3. You'll see it has the SharePoint DBs and it has the SSRS DBs. So it'll have your reporting services, right? Or web front, and then it'll have your third-party apps. Your application server will have your third-party apps, and these are different. Again, this will also be on our machine too. But I'm just gonna give it about 250 each for now, and our C drive I'll give 150. We'll do that, and always add if we want extra disks and RAID. Give it a RAID configuration later on. Okay, so install the SQL server. We're gonna install 216. All right. And we're going to install the Enterprise Standard Edition one. We're just going to download from the Microsoft website. We've already joined this to the domain. We're going to make sure that our servers join to the domain where SharePoint will be deployed. And we'll create services and install installation accounts. We'll use the same account. You can create different service accounts, sure. You can call it SharePoint admin, right? Call it SharePoint admin, right? Or you can call it SQL admin, right? You can have separate accounts for those if you'd like, right? Or just add those specific roles to your administrator account. So that way you have those set up for that, right? And then you can have one for database, admin, whatever you want to do, right? So whatever account, but those are just different installation accounts. I've seen a lot of people do that. You don't have to do that. I just use one separate account, EB admin. So you don't have to. Um, it's not necessary. Admin. Okay. That's that. What's next? So we had that. So here's the download pages for that. So I'm going to download. Let's get to the download page where we can install. We're going to download. Um, and then we are going to use the keys that are included in the enterprise trial product for that. So let's go ahead and download that first. And then we'll go ahead and create our machine. So I'll take the first log, the link, and I'm going to right click and paste, and I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so here it is, SharePoint server. So this is an image server that I'm going to download, right? And I'm going to download it. Once I double click on the disk image, I'll mount it to mount it as a drive on my computer. I'll right click and I'll mount that if it lets me, and then I'll run the splash HTA, right? So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to use the enterprise license for that. This will give me a 180 days to convert the license installation at any time. Obviously, I'm going to show you guys how to use this enterprise trial product key. So I'm going to take this product key and use that on that machine. But I need to create the machine first. So let's do that on the machine. This will be database. Transaction logs. Transaction logs. I think I also want to ask you guys to um, for our WFE, that'll kind of be our like if we were to create one, you would have to create a drive for applications and then one for data log because it needs its own content DB, right? So you have to kind of uh, you know manage that that aspect of it where you're telling it when you've got your search query services or your um, you know um, your data log files are basically being gonna be saved there. Um, okay. And that's sort of like your applications that are kind of installed on there. So you can have your application installed with your installation files. So this is where our applications are going to be installed. And I think this is going to be our system drive. So this is known as application. Just to make it easier for you guys to kind of understand, don't so you're not that confused. So this is similar. So this is where applications are going to be installed. Right. So I'll probably have to create another one here to show you that. Right. So this is where application. Applications. Right. That makes sense to you guys. And then this is our system drive or physical disk. Or these are obviously physical disks. I just want to clarify that physical disks. Right. Again, I can do whatever I want. I can create RAID systems. It's all up to you, right? It's all up to your company and how you guys want to go ahead and minimize that template. All right. So this is going to be our system, our C drive. Um, your system drive. System drive, also known as C. We install our OS. We're going to install our operating system. Right. Two. All right. All right. All right, guys. That's it. So that's how I kind of want to do it for now. Um, right. This is where we're gonna point all our. And again, I want you guys to do the same thing. So like your SharePoint files and your SQL files are gonna point. Your database files are they're all gonna point to your application, right? So if you're creating those member servers, right? And I also want you to create a client after because we're gonna also have a client sign in. So our clients are gonna sign in as well too, right? But again, understand where this is coming from, and this is going to have our application server and our web server, our front end, right? And this is going to be our database, okay? Um, and if you do not have space, again, um, you know, to install it, like I said, guys, you need 8 GB to install it at least, 6 to 8 GB, uh, right, to install, right? And then give it at least 10 or 12, 12 for now GB on your two server. You're deciding to go with two servers, right? Um, this you can give it 2 to 4 after 2 GB to 4. But again, if you're installing the OS, it's got to be 8. Okay, just remember that. And then you can shut off the machine if you're not using it to save yourself some space. Um, the more GB you have, the better it is. Again, you can use one CPU, right, to install this application. Um, but when you're installing to install the operating system, but when you're installing the OS, you want to give it at least two CPU, right? Um, shut the machines down if you're not using it. I'll write that down. Just make sure shut down machines. Shut down machines if you are not using it, right? So this will help save the uh, hardware resources, right? Right. So, typically I want like the more the merrier. Remember that? Like, if I'm giving myself, 16 GB RAM on a server, I can always add they're hot swap. They're not hot swap, but I can always add more memory. Right. I never want to decrease memory. I want to add memory. If I do want to decrease, I want to shut these other machines down before I decrease the memory. To give more memory to my other machines in testing and preparation, right? So that's the only reason why I want that. If you do have it, give yourself 24 GB or 32 GB each server for now, just for now. You don't really need it, but like I said, it's good to have more more memory on on these machines than not, right? So 32 GB in a production environment is pretty good or more. Just have more cores in that instance, have 16 cores on your servers than whatnot. That way you've got, your two services running from active to passive and, synchronizing between your two services in the tier three. You're obviously in a production environment, you have your services running on a load balancer, right? And those load balancers are dividing the load into 50%, right? So 50% on one server and 50% on the other. Say for example, there's 6,000 users or services that are number of users using that, so it'll divide into 3,000 each server for load balancing. And obviously the more cores you have the better. So for example, in this instance, um, your WFE servers, right, your front end web servers are going to have 12 cores and 24 GB each on each machine. Your C drive for installation is going to have, let's say, 80 to 100. um, and then it's going to have another drive for installing it, like application installation. And then you're also going to have one for data and logs, right? Um, or transaction log files. So it's always good to have extra than none. If you don't have enough space, and it doesn't matter, it's not like you're going to use the full hard drive. Again, I would give it, let's just say 250 for now. Right? This isn't a production environment. This is a test. Right? Copy. And I'm going to give this one two as well. 250. Obviously, I give it more for those logs, right? And then this one, I'm just going to give it 150. Let's say 250. We'll just match it for now. I'm not going to really use that, but again, understand how that works. And then this is going to be 150. Say 200. And I can add more, guys. I can add more disks if I want to. Remember, as we move along. I think this one here is, what did I give it? My server, what did I give? What did I give? What did I give? What did I give? 300. Oh, there we go. I gave it 300. So there you go. You know, right? Just to give you guys an idea of how it works just for an application, right? I don't want to mix anything into that because it'll ruin everything, right? And I can always revert back after if I want. I can always delete the drive and create the drive again, right? I can format the drive whenever I want. It's good for your production, I mean your test environments or your development environment. That way you can, delete them and start from scratch, right? No biggie. Very easy. I guess I'm just gonna give it 200 GB, right? This one 250. It doesn't matter. Obviously, I could have given it 500. I could have given it whatever I want technically. It's okay. Remember, more the merrier, right? I'm just giving you an example. I'm keeping it consistent. Again, this one should be 200 or 150. Let's see. Should be 150, believe it or not, guys. But again, I just want to give it 200 for now. If you have the space, why not, right? So it should be 100. Say 150, okay? Right? Because you want to explore and you don't want any issues. So it should be all 150, okay? I'm going to change the color to, I'm going to change the color for you guys. All right. All right. You understand that? Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. That's going to be our client. I'm going to be a server and it's going to have Windows 11. Give it a line here. Again, this just needs a window. This just needs Windows 11, right? That's what it needs. It doesn't need any applications or off or apps. It could use the internet to get the apps. It can use websites to get to the apps as long as it's joined to the domain and it's connecting there. Okay, Remember, in net cards, we spoke about this as well too. In another drawing, I want you guys to understand that um, you've got your physical net cards, and again, you can join these for net teaming if you like. I'm not going to do that, but you guys could if you want. It's an option. And one's going to be your local internet with static IPs, and then all right, and then your second one is going to have internet for internet in case you need the internet. So if you don't need it, don't add it. If not, don't worry about it, right? Um, you don't need internet on your domain controllers unless you're installing or downloading something. So, or you're synchronizing, then that's when you need the internet, right? So if you have your AAD server, for example, you have an AADC server that's got the AADC role. So for example, you'll have your AADC, right? All right. Then obviously you're going to synchronize the users to the cloud. Then yeah, that's when you're going to want to add internet. But again, I've seen people use them in separate servers. But in our instance, I'm using it in our domain controller, right? So internet's available here. You don't really need it. You can disable it if you're not using it. It's not gonna affect anything. So it's just an idea. Um, you're more than welcome to try that out if you'd like. Okay. Straightforward, guys. Any questions? Please feel free to ask me. I want you guys to try this out on your own. Um, and I'm going to go ahead and just install it. As soon as I get it to install, then I'm going to get you guys to try the rest on your own, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and create this machine. This machine, I'm going to still keep on. I like it. Not a big deal. All right, so we're going to roll new virtual machine. Click next. Next. This is going to have my server machine. So I'm going to add my server machine, but it's going to be, we're going to call this server 2. This is going to be called DC server. This is going to be called SharePoint server. Okay. One, it's my first one. And then I'm going to put today's date, which is November 11th, 2024, right? And I'm going to move this to here. And I'm going to create a new folder called SharePoint. Right? And choose that. And then click OK. And then put that in another folder here. There you go. So, so that's that. That's my one server. I'm going to click next. By default, 60 is okay. It's not a big deal. This is going to be, I'm going to split the disk into multiple files. So it makes it easier when we're moving machines from one computer to another. That's okay. Not a big problem. This one here, we said it was going to be 250. Again, you can use 150, right? Or 80. Doesn't matter. It'll be 150. Actually, you know what? I'll keep it to the way I said it. 200, fine. Doesn't matter. You're not going to use the full thing. I'm going to click next and then customize the hardware. I'm going to give it a lot because this is going to act as my, I'm going to give it 16 because I said I'm going to add it as my application server, my database server, right? So I'm just going to continue to do that. And then I'll split it after if I want to create another server in another video. Close. 16. I'm going to hit OK, close. And oh, I'm going to, again, I can give it the processor speed if I want. This is, if I were to add this in my Hyper-V environment, obviously, guys, you want to make sure you enable Hyper-V, right? If we had a hypervisor. if this was a hypervisor machine, but it's just a bare metal machine. We just include that. And we said we're gonna make the 16 core. We don't have to. We give a 4 core if we want, right? For now. I know we spoke that we were gonna give this our front end. We should give it a minimum of 16 cores, but you can give it 8 or more. It's all up to you. Depends on what you need it for. I'm just gonna give it 4 for now for testing, and then we'll add as we need. Because we said that this is going to be a VMnet, I'm gonna add that to the VMnet so that it connects to the same level. And I'm gonna add another um, I'm going to add another network adapter. I can add the network adapter, right? Add, finish. That's going to act as our net. And then I also want to add a hard disk, right? So we said if we go back to our drawing here, I'm going to add 2 more drives at 250 drives. I'm going to add 2 more drives, right? So I'm going to add 2 more. Well, I won't be able because it hasn't been created yet. So this isn't a trusted platform. I don't need to install BitLocker in this one. I won't be installing BitLocker. Floppy drive, CD drive. No, I don't need to do that. It's already there. I need to mount it. SCSI, generic SCSI device. No, don't need to add a SCSI device. Okay, it's good to know. To remove that. So once I create it, I'm going to create the 2 separate disks. Okay. I'm going to accelerate 3D graphics here. And I'm going to click close and finish. So that's going to create my disk now. Perfect. And I'm going to find out what VMnet I'm going to change. Okay, so I can change this at any time. So this one is already pre-lit to V10. I should be changing that. The 8 processors I don't need. So I'm going to, I don't need 8 processors. I need 2. So I need to shut this off. I'm not going to be adding more. Okay, so I'm going to shut this off. Power it on, shut down. I'm going to give back my processor. So when I was installing our Nessus server, a Tenable Nessus server, I was showing you guys on that. There's a video on that if you guys want to see from my October cybersecurity month. So this is shutting down. That's done. So I've now given myself a disk, so I should be able to edit it that now. And should be able to add yeah, there we go. I should be able to add the disk. So I'm just gonna add it's recommended for now. I'm gonna create a new virtual disk. I'm not gonna allocate all the disk space now. I'm just because it's not a physical disk tray that I can, or a SAN server. Uh, if I purchased that for that, but in this case, no, I can use whatever I want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean I'm going to use the whole thing. It's just for testing. I won't be using that. And back, next. So I've created that. Click finish. And I'm also going to create another one as per our diagram. Next, 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 next. Oh, let's say 250. Right. Remember, it's going to be more in production environment. right? Obviously, you're going to be using more. I'm going to click finish. And that's it. I'm going to click OK. And again, I can expand these as I want, right? I want that anytime. Let's shut it down now. I'm going to click OK. If I shut it down, let's go back to my settings here and decrease the processor speed because I'm going to need some of that now. There we go. Go back to 2. That's how I wanted it last time. Could be 1 if I want. So I'm going to power on this machine. And I'm going to load the ISO now on this machine. So I'm going to load the ISO image for 2219. So if I go to Windows, so Windows Server, let's see guys, if I let me see something here. If I can remember, go to settings here. This is in data. Okay. And so this should be powering on now. Edit the machine. Usually you would go and download it, guys. I'll send you the link on how to down. Obviously, you guys are going to, you know, download. You guys are going to go like this: download Windows Server 22 or 19, whatever version you want, right? And you guys are going to be using the server here, right? And you guys are going to be downloading the 64-bit version or VHD if you're creating a Hyper-V machine. Just click on that and then just download. So that's gone ahead and downloaded that. Okay, cancel that. So I'll send you guys a link for that. Add that machine now. Browse. We said it's here. Data. Windows Server. There we go. Click OK. Okay. And there we go. I can power this on. And I'm going to go ahead and install this machine, server machine. So hang tight while I go ahead and do that. All right, guys, give me 1 second, okay? So guys, as you can see it, when it says boot to CD DVD, I want you to click inside and that's the trick. You know, I'm not loading to firmware. There's nothing I need to do to load into firmware unless I add the password to that, and I can set that up later. I could set password, BIOS passwords if I want. Um, that's an option that I have, um, you know, anytime here. You know, I can set that up at any time. Um, and I would have to or set up the shared folders. I don't need to set up any shared folders yet for this one. And just installing the SharePoint server, I can install it directly from the website. There's no applications I need to bring over. Unless I do, I would do that. I would add that in. But that needs to, the machine needs to be turned off in order for that to happen. And I am not enabling secure boot. I'm just gonna leave it as is for now, guys. And enable drag and drop is checked off. I'm not gonna run a snapshot just yet. Once I install that, I'll run the snapshot. I'll run 2 snapshots. Okay. I'll run one as a template, just with the Windows server, and then another one with server SharePoint installed. Okay, so you have 2 snapshots here, guys, from me. And okay. Canada. Click next. Install. All right. So we're gonna use the data center that has the full graphical user interface. So desktop experience. The other one has the omits the graph and manages a little command prompt. So we're gonna avoid that. It's up to you to use the standard evaluation. It's up to you. Doesn't really matter. So we're gonna click next for data center evaluation and off to the races. All right, we click next. We're gonna accept the license software license terms, and we're authorizing to bind it to bind the organization. You're more than welcome to read the notices and license terms if you'd wish before you click next. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And I'm going to, we're not upgrading. We're going to be customizing it, installing a totally new operating system, right? And we're going to be moving, our first one is 200 for now, right? And we're going to click next. We're not formatting anything. We're just going to click next. We want to install our operating system on our first available unallocated space that we said 150 or 200 GB. You can use, again, you can use 80 GB or 60 GB just for the OS. Its minimum is 50. I think with 2000 there is a minimum, but we can look up the minimum requirements to install an operating system for Windows Server 2019. So minimum hard disk space to install Windows Server 2022. Should be, yeah. So they're saying be aware that should be considered an absolute minimum. Like that's just to install the core with web services server role. right? The server core, which is the graphical one. But I think oh, there we go. This is actually pretty good. So the minimum components of storage would be 32, and that would run server core plus IIS. We're not doing TPM chips. We're not going to be doing BitLocker on this one. But I recommend you should too. You should try that if you have the opportunity. I know with Server Pro 17, you can add TPM, so enable secure boot for TPM 2.0. In this case, I don't really need it. Um, so we are in the middle of install, so I'll be right back. So the machine's rebooting, guys. It's a typical installation. You can add I want you guys to add the character to it as well. I'm not gonna do it here, just because I want to minimize the time spent on this. Again, if this was a full course, I would have, but again, this is just a quick introduction on it. You're gonna create your administrator account and put your administrator password. Good. And I want you guys to make it as simple as possible. Um, Understandable to you only. And once you're done with that, I want you to click finish. So we do create our administrator account, but we also want to join into the domain so that we're able to log in with our SC admin, our Toronto admin, so that way it's installed. But before we also do that, I also want to install um, so that's done. We're going to install that. We got to install the software. Um, we need to install SQL Server first before we install SharePoint. But before we do that, this is actually last. I don't know why first, but I'm going to add this last. And then I also want to add install VMware to solve give it character and customize it. Give it character and customize your VM, right? So power management, we can use sconfig for manual updates, um, static IP, addressing, right? Um, right. And again, stick to your static IP addressing. Use your static IP addressing. Again, your private IPs. So if I look at my static IP addressing here, for this instance, um, what did I say I wanted? Oh, so in this instance, I'm using the 192.168 um, 100 or 200 subnet mask, right? Sorry, um, host or VLAN. So I'll be doing that, and then I'll be using my one, and then my subnet mask is 255.255.0. My gateway is .100.50, and my preferred DNS is .1. Similar, and then my next server is going to be .2 and 3 and 4 and so forth, so right. So I can do this whatever I want. I can also use the private IP address of 172.16 private address, right? If you want, it's up to you. Or you can use the 10.0.0.1 IP addressing, right? Or subnet slash 24 slash 16, I think it is. And this is slash 24, right? So here's the private IP, private IP addressing for that if you want to use that. In my instance, we're going to use 192.168.100 or 200.0. I think I've already started one of the machines. If I do have it, I have to log in. So we'll log into this machine and we'll check out what the IPs are. Yeah, so I think we're using 100 here because the ESXi stated was 7.7. So that's going to be my ESXi1 for the Canadian Data Center. This is going to be uh, .8, right? So that's going to be my .8 machine. So I'm going to give it a .8 for this one. But in your instance, you're going to get a 1, 2, and 3. So if you look at the picture, you're going to give your DC.1, your um, standalone server or member server, .2 and 3 and 4 and so forth, right? So you're going to go in order. In order, your gateways are going to be .50, right? And then you're going to have your preferred DNS, the same IP as your, that's going to be installed. So well, let's install the new DC, right? If you had a separate router or switch for that or machine for that, you would obviously give that IP address and make sure that that IP address is accessible. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and log in a user account that I created. There you go. This machine is logged in, and we said that we are going to the character customize my VM power management. Here, the character and customize your VM. So again, I state that. Okay. My options are power management, sconfig option, and manual updates. We're going to turn that off. Set it to manual updates. We're going to give it static IPs. Enable IESEC, right? And if necessary, turn off, turn, turn off firewalls. Necessary. That steps 2. and whatever options you guys want. So uh, skip page, just as necessary, turn it off, firewall, and VMware tools. All right, and then once that's done, we'll go ahead and okay. So we'll join it to the domain if we need to, but I want to log in first. Log in.
The fork away then. Put the fork.
Okay, guys, welcome back. The machine was logged in. We added the administrator accounts, and we were I was typing the next steps in order. So we moved some stuff around here. Um, and we're going to download, not just install, but we'll download this for now, and then I'll probably create another video, uh, a third part, and then I'll just download this for now, and then end this video for the time being. So this is download only. We're gonna go ahead and download and then install it. We're not gonna install the server yet. We're just gonna download the SQL server first, and then install it, and then we'll download that. But let's just do the characterization for now and the customizations first, because the customization is important. Customization, right? So that is important. So these steps will be an important part of it, and install the VMware tools while we're at it, right? And we'll also be able to add it to the domain. So hopefully that should work now too. But before we do that, we need to do the IP management. So that's also the static. So that'll be our first thing we're gonna do is IP management, DNS records. Right. So we'll do the DNS records too as well. We'll add that DNS record. Um, and then move this over to static IP. Well, this isn't really, we're not going to be using DHCP, so we'll just say static IP for IP management. So we're not really doing DHCP in this instance, but we will do the static IP first, then the DNS records. Um, we'll use NSLOOKUP and ping to confirm. Then we'll change the power management. We'll do the sconfig, and we'll disable, turn off, or disable this. IESec, and if necessary, turn off the firewalls, and then install a VMware tool. So I'll add this up here to the first three. So let's do that first. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So right click, settings, right click, install VMware tools. And we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait for the. There we go. There's a drive. I'm gonna run the setup. So that's the setup is running. I want to go into DNS right now, and I need to check what my DNS records are, and I want to create the DNS record for the SharePoint server. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Go to administrative tools, DNS. I go to my forward lookup zone. I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna give it 8. So I'm gonna create a new record, host record, and I'm gonna call it SC SharePoint Server 1 Canada. Okay, and I'm gonna get it the IP address. Okay. So that's created, done. I've created the DNS record. Okay. I'm going to go to properties. I'm gonna leave this here in case I need that. I'm gonna check my reverse lookup zone, my RLZs, my FLZs are created. There's my reverse lookup zone. I'm gonna give it a refresh just because I want to give it a refresh. Okay, I'm gonna hit OK. That should be done. Oh, this has to close. Okay, close that, cancel, and now refresh. Refresh. Go to my reverse, my RLZs. There's my, okay, perfect. So I have that done. I can now go ahead and create those, give it a static IP. Complete. Install. And I'm going to go to, so my next step is via static DNS record, static IP. So give it the static IP, then DNS lookup. All right. No, I don't want to do that yet. I'm going to go to my adapters here, Ethernet, change adapter settings, and my Ethernet 0 is my local, right? And this is going to be my NAT or my internet, so I'm going to rename that to internet. NAT. This is going to be, this is going to be local. or local internet. Okay. So right click, go to rename. Or properties, disable IPv6, right? And then make changes, and then give the following IP. Default gateway. We say that it's 50, so we're going to give it the gateway. Let's see what I put. So we set in our drawing, we're going to do 50, so I want you guys to keep it, the diagram. In my instance, it's going to be a little bit different. So in my instance, it's going to be different. Yours is going to be different as well, please. Just make note of that. Based on the drawing that I gave you. So if you look at the drawing, guys, I said that the gateway is 50, right? And your preferred DNS is pointing to your domain controller. So you have your DNS installed on your domain controller. And I said, what did I say? So I'm going to go to properties. I'm going to go there, properties, and it's pointing to itself. So I'm just going to leave it as, I'm just going to say 10 for now. That's good. That, that. Okay. Same as that. And I'm going to put it as the same. Guys, yours is different. Do not copy mine. Yours is going to be 1, 2, and 3. Starting from that, this is just me adding from an old DC. Again, I should create. We should all create a new DC for this one. Click OK. Click close. Click yes. So let's verify that now, guys, and see if we can ping the results. Right click. And as admin, let's say ping SC DC SVR pingable, right? NS lookup, see if it resolved. Okay, it didn't resolve yet. So let's go back to let's remove the internet here because I don't need it. Okay. Go here. Okay. Internet here. So going to right click settings, network adapter, properties, properties. Okay, so there you go. Properties, properties. This is DNS, ECPU. This I don't need. I can disable that for now. I should just have this one IP address. And if I go to command prompt, okay, renew. Okay. That's good. It's giving me that. That's what I want. Gateway points to itself probably, so that's why it's not giving me an IP address for that. But if I go back to the DNS, that's good. We should be able not to ping it. So let's try again. Let's try That's good. I might have to restart this computer. That's fine. I did that. Our next step from my list is we can't confirm that yet. We'll have to wait. So that's gonna be green. Hold on, that's gonna be wait. Power management, power settings, but that can be done here. So if I go to local server, time zone should be your time zone. I'll have that as well too. Click OK. Click OK. Turn this off for administrator and users. Um, Properties, enable IPv6, which is what we did. Properties, enable IPv6. Okay. Done. This is already managed. So what I would do is I would go to command prompt, right? And I would type in sconfig. And then once I open up my sconfig, I choose option 5 and make sure that's set to manual. I don't want manuals updating yet. I want my WSUS to do that. Right, and then it looks like updates are set to download only, which is what we probably see. Probably set to download only, right? Which is what it did. So if I choose 5, click enter. I want manual updates. And then hit enter to continue. And then exit the command line. And then that's it. So that's that. So that is done. Um, Licensing. Uh, So for that, internet is required. Internet is required. Okay. It's a little bit smaller. All right. So I've done all that. I'm not going to turn the firewall. I'm not going to do that. I just need to do the NS lookup again. I'm just going to restart the computer again, guys. I'm going to restart both computers. And I will be right back. So restart. Let's wait for all the services and binaries to load. Um, uh, let's see. Right. So I'm gonna wait for this to once this is done, guys, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna create another video and start with the actual install of SQL Server and SharePoint on another video. So I'm gonna just get this to work and join this to the domain. Once that's done, guys, I should be good. I should be good to go. Sign in. Binaries are done here finally. Um, okay. So let's see if we can actually connect to the machines now. See if we can ping them. Let's see. DC, yes, we are. There you go. So we got connection here. And then I'm gonna do an NS lookup. Should read the NS lookup. Ping. Uh, config. I think it's got our NAT internet, so that's why it's picking up our NAT internet. But you'll see that our line is picked up. It's reading good. If I were to disable for internet, so it is reading our hasn't read our DNS yet. So we're open up DNS management. All right, so should be able to ping. Yeah, come on. I'm not able to ping it. I go should I'm gonna restart this machine. So I'm gonna end this for now, guys. So I'm just gonna review what we've done so far. So we are going to um, give it the customization for the VM, which is what we did. And in my next video, I'm going to download the SQL server and the SharePoint site. So I'm going to end it here. I want you guys to do it on your end, and try this on your end, get this machines ready, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, guys.